Hey everyone, this is Teresa from Base 10 Montessori, and today I want to go over part 2 of Intro to Observations. And today we're going to go over plant observations and zoo observations. These are both exercises that are going to help you prepare for observations in the classroom. And if you want to reformat this as a lesson for your students, this is also a great opportunity to teach middle schoolers and high schoolers about the importance of observations. And it's something that you can take a field trip out to do, or it's something that you can even do in your backyard if you live in the country. So take this opportunity to look at this as something for yourself, but also something that you can use for your homeschool program or within your classroom itself, and figure out how to adapt these lessons for your environment, whether or not you're a Montessori teacher, you're a Montessori parent, or you're just somebody who's really interested in this subject. So with that being said, let's move on to plant observations. So here are the instructions for a plant observation. Make a drawing of the site of observation. You want to include the plant selected and its surroundings. And use your observation journal for recording and following the discussed guidelines for observations. Describe your state of mind and emotions periodically on the side in that subjective column so as to not interfere with your direct observation. Write a detailed description of the physical characteristics of the plant, its immediate environment and surroundings, like the type of soil, if it's wet or dry, and then the presence of other species, fauna and flora. Record all the interactions with the other species, including humans. And an example of that would be if a bird is standing on a small branch on the upper side of the canopy under the foliage. And then record the relationship of the plant to the non-living components in the environment: water, sun, air, soil. So example, the wind is blowing from west to east, lifting the bottom petals of the flower. You may describe a person going by or something or somebody touching the plant. After the observation, and this is where we're going to go back to gathering scientific data, you want to record all available background information about the plant of your choice and include scientific name and common name, country of origin, natural habitat, status of the species, whether it's threatened with extinction or it's endangered, etc., and any relevant information you can get a hold of that particular plant. And I would encourage you, if you're doing a plant observation, pick something you don't know, right? Pick something that you are not familiar with, challenge yourself a little bit. Because, like I said before, you're trying to cultivate the ability to objectively observe, record, and synthesize the material. Make every effort to keep your observation scientific and record only what you perceive through your senses, because observations are sensorial. We only write about the senses that we use. And I'm not going to go fully into my exercise on the plant observation. I'm just going to go quickly through it and point out a couple things. So here's my journal, and at the top I have we're in the MISD parking lot area, the CASA area. The weather is sunny with a cool breeze, and notice my mood. My mood. I'm frustrated, upset, overwhelmed. I don't remember why, but this was getting to be the end of summer, the end of training, and I was pretty much at my limit at that point in time, but I was still healthy. So, we start out with the time, the objective facts, and then our subjective column. We start out by drawing that diagram. And I know you guys are just in awe of my artistic abilities. Anyways, so I start writing about the details of the plant, and notice I have a few comments in the subjective column. And our goal really is to not need that subjective column the better we get at observations. And you're going to notice at first, when you first start doing observations, particularly in the classroom, not as much, I think, when doing objects in plants and animals. I don't have as many subjective comments in those situations, but goodness, when I started observing in the classroom, I had a lot of subjective thoughts. It was totally different. So it's really good to start out with these nature observations and object observations before you try and do classroom observations, because honestly, it's going to be overwhelming how many subjective thoughts you have. And then I finish my observation, and then later on I go back and I fill in all the scientific information about the plant that I had found when I was doing this exercise at training. So there's the information on that. Now, the next thing that I really want to get into are animal observations, or my zoo observation from training. I really want to go through that. I want to give you some good examples of that because it's really different observing in an area with a lot of distractions. It's really different observing when what you're observing can move and leave, or maybe not show up at all. And so zoo observations, animal observations are also really, really great. And they are the next challenge, the next isolation of difficulty in this journey of observation skills. Really separating yourself from what are the objective facts and what are my subjective feelings. But with that being said, let's move on to the zoo observations. So here we are with an example of my zoo observation. Now, I will tell you that I wrote everything down in a journal. I simply typed this up to condense everything, make it legible, and hopefully a little bit more coherent, because when you are writing in your journals and you're journaling a lot, first of all, I have terrible handwriting. It's really messy. It's kind of hard to read. And not only that, it's a quite a long observation and I want to shorten it up. I simply typed this up just for the ease of being able to look at the information. So let's look at this first part. The first part where it is the date, August 2nd, place, San Diego Zoo, and the weather is sunny and warm. My mood is happy. I've been waiting all summer for this observation. I just want to say I knew the animal that I was going to observe all summer. Inside one of our practice rooms where we were going to training was a wooden sculpture of a rhinoceros. All summer I was looking at that wooden rhinoceros thinking, that is my animal. That's what I wanted to go see. I was excited to observe this animal, and so I waited all summer, and I was really, really happy when I finally got to go to the zoo and look at the rhino. That was my animal. And it turned out to be a very interesting observation, and I'll talk about that more as we go along. So as far as health goes, I was pretty healthy, but I was feeling like I had some allergy issues that day. So that's important to be aware of when you're doing your observations. Remember, how we're feeling can affect things. So I come into the zoo, I'm really excited. I know exactly where I'm going, and I make a beeline straight to the rhinoceros area. My observation began at 9:45 a.m. And notice already that the subjective column, it's getting pretty busy. It was filled in a lot more than all my other observations. When I am out in this public place, I'm out not with people I'm going to training with who are doing the same exercise as me, but people who are there for family reasons, entertainment reasons, right? There's a lot of things that you can't control when you're in a public place like this. And there's a lot of things you can't control when you're doing observations on living things that can move. So as you notice, my subjective column was pretty filled up that day. So at 9:45 a.m., I wrote, the rhino began walking to the left and went out of sight. So all of a sudden, I get there, I'm excited, and the rhino leaves. I got pretty frustrated, right? All summer I waited and I thought, oh no, it didn't occur to me that the rhino would leave and maybe not come out for the rest of the observation time. And that was really frustrating. And I thought, well, geez, should I just choose a different animal? What am I going to do? And in my subjective column, I was writing, not sure if I can see well enough from where I am at, and I'm feeling frustrated that I can't see. There's lots of noise and distractions, and it's hard to focus. So already my happy day is kind of working against me. I'm kind of thinking, okay, maybe I didn't make the best choice here. And you're going to experience this when you're doing your classroom observations, when you have, particularly if you have an observation where you're supposed to observe a specific child and they leave the room, or they go home, or they are, because you do observations for a week at a time. If that child is sick for a day and they don't come into school, You're like, okay, well, what am I going to do now? Right? So these are real things that happen when you're doing your observations. And these are the real challenges you're going to be facing. So this is why this more complex uh, observation is something we need to work towards, and you're going to realize that you have a lot more limitations here. So at 9:50 I wrote, he was gone for several minutes and then walked back and stood to the left of the mud pit. Oh wait, I forgot to show you my diagram. Let's pause for a second, because I know that you can't get enough of my artistic ability. I feel like we need to pause and take a look at the diagram I drew so you can have perfect understanding and perfect clarity of exactly what I saw. And I know you are going to be in awe of this. Take a look. Is that not the best art you've ever seen in your entire life? Uh, Matter of fact, my drawing is so good that I couldn't even get around to drawing a rock formation. I just wrote the word rock formation where the rocks were. I would say don't judge me, but I kind of deserve to be judged. So go ahead and judge away. Go ahead and leave a comment down below, right? So anyways, I drew my diagram. This is what it looks like. And a lot of the time I got so overwhelmed with trying to draw, I just labeled things. I'm like, oh, here's water. That's what water looks like. Here's what food looks like. Oh, look, this is what a rock formation looks like. It's a big wall. And of course, I can't draw it in context, so I just wrote rock formation. And of course, a pile of dirt and then a mud pit. So with that being said, now that you can see exactly everything in perfect clarity, let's go back to my description. So at 9:50, he was gone for several minutes and then walked back and stood to the left of the mud pit. He lay down on his back left side and put his front leg up slightly and placed his chin on the ground. His ears twitch back and forth. The nostrils are wet and dripping liquid. There are several bumps and wrinkles on the skin. The ears are turned backwards. He continues to stay on the ground in the sun. Notice, I started at 9:45 and this is getting to be what, 9:50. So I've already been there a good 5 minutes and not much is happening. At 10 o'clock, I say the ears stand up and face forward from his body. The mouth touches the ground. The left side of the rhino is slightly in the shade. He tucks his right front leg under his body. And on the right side, let's take a look at some of my subjective comments that I had been writing so far. Okay, should I move when the rhino goes out of sight? Right? That's something you're going to have to think about when you're doing your observations. When you're sitting still for a really long period of time, at what point do you get up and move? These are going to be questions that you have as you're going through observations. Another subjective thing that I wrote is I'm getting a little bored. There's nothing to watch now, and I want to watch the busy giraffes instead. I remember looking over at the giraffes and being like, man, that would have been a better animal to observe because they're doing stuff. My rhino's not doing anything. And so I wait around some more. The rhino really doesn't do too much. And at 10:20, I say, the rhino lifted his head up and placed it back down on the ground. The eyes continued to stay open. The right ear quickly flicked forward and then backwards. The ears continue to move back and forth while the body stays still. Behind his horn, there is a darker brown spot. And so as you can see, for the first half hour of my observation, there was a lot of frustration. There was a lot of noise. There was a lot of distraction. And, there's just a lot of things I couldn't control. And I kind of looked around at other places that were close by thinking, oh, maybe that would have been a better thing to observe. So this observation goes on for a really long time. And my last observation that I did was at 11:33. So we're going to skip ahead. I'm not going to go through everything that I wrote because I don't feel like it's necessary. So let's just skip to the end of my observation, which was at 11:33. Notice I started at 9:45 a.m. and I left at 11:33 a.m. That's a pretty long observation, and a lot happened, a lot didn't happen, and there are a lot of things that I ended up writing in my subjective column. Let's look at what I wrote at the very end here. So in the objective column, I wrote, the rhino walked to the mud pit and then he walked into the mud pit. He put his head in the water. He lay down in the mud pit and rested his chin on the edge of the pit. His ears are slanted backwards. He moved his right ear forward and then back. A tour bus drives by while this is happening. The eyelids move up and down. The eyelashes flutter up and down. He rolled to the right and then to the left. He is wet on the right side. His body rests on the left side of the pit with the right side facing up. And in the subjective column, I wrote, children are on the bench in front of me and kicking at people while I try to observe. People keep pushing in front of me and I can't see very well. Feeling very frustrated. So as you can see, it gets a little bit more difficult when we start observing things in real time in public places with living creatures. This is why we have to work up to this skill. And we really have to work up to these longer observations because you're going to spend a lot of time standing still, just watching something. And that takes a lot of practice as well, just being still. These are the things I want you to keep in mind as you're going through your observations and as you're progressing to different skill levels in your observations, right? This is all coming before we even get around to what classroom observations look like in Montessori. And again, we're going to draw diagrams. And when you're doing your classroom observations, you're also going to draw diagrams of the classroom where everything is laid out. You're going to take notes on, the colors of the walls and the shelves and the size. So you're going to be as detailed as possible when you start doing classroom observations. And then because this is a nature observation, we're going to collect scientific data afterwards. So the scientific name for the animal I chose is Rhinoceros unicornis. The common name is greater one-horned rhino, and the zoo named this particular rhino Parvesh. The origin of this species is Southeast Asia. The natural habitat is Asian plains. The status is endangered, and then we're going to have an area where we can put any other information that we find out about it, like the date of birth, 2/25/2014. Place of birth, San Diego Zoo Safari Park. Mother, Alta. Sister, Charlize. So there's our extra information that we're going to include when we do the scientific data collection. And before we finish up, I want to show you just how accurate, how incredible, and how true to size and detail my drawing ability is. I'm going to share with you some pictures from my observation. So here's Parvesh. Here's my rhino. It looks, I know, just like my drawing. There's a little different picture of him. Looks just like my drawing. It's unbelievable. Again, never been to art school. Here's a picture of him eating that food. The food that I so lovely drew and labeled just in case you couldn't tell it was food in the picture. Oh, and so you see in the background, there's my giraffes that I kept getting distracted by. I'm like, I want to go over there. They're doing things. My rhino's not doing anything. So there's my giraffes in the background. And I kept looking over longingly thinking, that would have been a better observation. And there is some of the extra information about the greater one-horned rhinoceros, the Rhinoceros unicornis. So this is our first step into observational studies in Montessori. I hope that you have enjoyed this experience. I hope that you are excited about doing observations because honestly, they're really wonderful. Whether you can draw or not, it's still a really great exercise. It's still a really great experience. Some of you, maybe you're great at drawing and you're terrible at describing things in words. I understand it's difficult. It is a difficult thing for some people to do. I don't mind the writing part so much, but goodness, asking me to draw something, that was painful. That was really painful. It's not something I enjoy, so that's something I have to struggle with. But it is a great experience whether or not you're good at something. And I really wanted to show you today that you don't have to be great at it to work on this exercise, and it's going to benefit you even if you're really weak at it. I didn't want to show you a perfect observation because I'm not perfect at it. I'm not necessarily great at it. There are definitely people out there way more skilled, but we got to start somewhere, right? We got to start somewhere with our observations, and we really need to go back to the beginning and just start with a simple observation of an object. Start with your simple observation, just an object, no diagrams. Work your way through it, right? One sense, the sense of sight. Work your way to multiple objects, more than one thing happening at one observation, right? But still we're limited in our sensorial experience with the objects that we're observing. And then we're going to work our way to an object that we can interact with. We're going to include a diagram of this object. And then we're going to work our way to a plant observation, a living thing, right? Something that we can't control quite as well as an object observation. We're going to start going out into a place where we're not in control of everything, and there are going to be different interactions. Things in the environment can interact with the plant, and we might have more than one sensory exploration with that object. We're going to draw our diagram. And of course, then we're going to move on to a very uncontrolled observation of a living creature that can move, that can do things, that maybe aren't fun to observe. Maybe you're going to be in an environment that's really distracting. Once again, fantastic artwork, followed by scientific data collection. And just remember that these are great skills to cultivate in your students, in your children, in your own life. You know, you don't have to be a Montessori teacher to appreciate this. So my suggestion is just to go out there, try this exercise. You know, it it's a great way, I think, for a lot of people to be more appreciative of what's around them, to be more in tune with what's around them, and to start really noticing how their mind works and how your mind works, how easy it is to jump to an assumption. And we need to hold back on that. We need to look at the facts, not fill in the blanks with imagination. So with that being said, I know this is a long video. I'll put timestamps in. I'll try to make it as simple as possible so that you can come back to it in different places. I know you're not all going to want to listen to this at once. So with that being said, like, share, comment, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next video.